All right. So hello, everyone. Welcome to the Nickel and Dimes Economics and Finance Clusters Roundtable. Today, we'll be looking at the G20 and talking about, its role, its effectiveness, its general reception. This is a pretty relevant topic as just recently India held the G20 presidency for the first time and hosted the G20 Summit in New Delhi. There were quite a number of resolutions which were reached and promises set. And India really used it to, bolster its political standing. But before we get into all of that, let's just, lay the groundwork for the G20 first. The G20 is a forum comprising of 19 sovereign countries, the EU, and the African Union. It works to address issues related to the global economy, such as financial stability, climate change, and sustainable development. So let's see, to begin with, do G20 countries actually have the political will in the first place to contribute and cooperate on these issues? Whoever would like to speak can just go ahead.
So can I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
So G20 being comprised of one of the major economies of the world, the member countries recognize the importance of working together to address different issues, global issues related to global warming, trade, and all the other factors. I think it has a good political standpoint to contribute to a better cooperation between countries, to have a smoother relationship, and to tackle more important issues like global warming and rising sea level and counterterrorism, all the issues that are affecting the countries and the world, helping helping to create a unique forum, so that a global standpoint of different countries, irrespective of their power in the world, can share their point of view and have a cooperative decision making among themselves.
Yes, just to add on to what Aryan and also Shreya had said in the starting, I strongly feel that the G20 by itself was formed as a forum to work on many issues that have been actually plaguing the world economy, right from climate change till trade imbalances. Actually, in the starting, wherein the G20 grouping was formed, at least from my personal point of view, at least I had a view that the balance of power was more on the western side, since when compared to the size of the economy in the 2008 in the year 2008 or 9, when the G20 grouping by itself was formed, it was actually something which was quite different from to what it is actually today. And since we all of us know that India and China are actually expected to take a huge huge amount of uh, leadership when it actually comes to the world affairs. I strongly feel that they have the political will to cooperate on major issues, on major issues.
Just adding on to the already said points, I would like to speak about some few examples that have happened in terms of which have been a result of political cooperation among the G20 members. Because the G20 members is essentially a platform for all the major world economies to come together at a specific forum, be it developing economies like India and China, or developed economies and the hegemonic power that the US holds. But interestingly, the more successful instances of this cooperation has been seen in times of world crises, like the 2008 financial crisis that had happened, and the COVID COVID-induced economic slowdown that had happened. And herein, there were more instances of successful negotiations that happened with the coming through of the Financial Stability Board, which was committed to which was committed to providing fiscal stimulus packages to other countries in 2008, and also with respect to suspension of debt service payments for the poorest nations during the 2020 induced. However, it's crucial to also note at the same time that the political will, sort of to say, wanes away when the interests, sort of the national interests, start disaligning. In terms of, for example, there would be the trade issue that Vasu had started to talk about. And yeah, I think we can move forward the conversation.
One more point I could add on to what Chetan just said. I think the political will wanes away for countries to cooperate with each other, especially when they are trying to preserve their own economies. So, a very good example would be anti-dumping duties. So, if we see now, India has become very aggressive with the amount of anti-dumping duties that it is imposing on other countries, from where we see a huge amount of imports of a lot of different products. So, um, economic cooperation sort of wanes away when each country is trying, each developing country especially, is trying to sort of preserve their own economies and wouldn't want to destroy their own markets by flooding it with foreign goods.
I think I would like to say that while a general commitment to cooperate on global economic issues, when it comes to political will, there are varying levels. Like some countries with more narrowed down domestic economies have been willing to cooperate, while some have other leadership priorities. So I think it's more of a balanced approach when it comes to different nations taking a call on economic cooperation.
All right. So just pulling on some of, a few of everyone's points. Chetan mentioned how decision making has often actually been the most effective during times of crisis. Arush mentioned how there's a lot of self-interest or countries looking at within their own economies to further certain decisions. So does this actually make overall the G20's decision-making process generally a little too slow or cumbersome, or because we're seeing periods where it's successful and periods where perhaps it's not as successful?
Look, I strongly feel that G20. I'm really sorry, Arush. Like I'll speak first.
Yeah, go ahead. No issues.
So I think, look, according to me, look, the G20 forum by itself was formed on strong democratic ideals, and G20 by itself follows a consensus-based approach, wherein any declaration which is to be declared, it requires acceptance from all G20 members. So it actually takes a huge amount of time. So the decision making process by itself, the system itself is something which is slow, and it is more of a complex process. Since G20 by itself comprises of the most democratic countries of the world, I have a view that the process by itself is really very slow and also very cumbersome. So I strongly feel that the G20 grouping by itself have to work on making the process more streamlined and also more effective and more faster, to ensure that the global issues are addressed at that moment itself. So as to avoid any delay.
So I believe that I do agree that yes, the decision-making process and the overall way in which crises and different topics are being discussed upon in the G20 is very slow. But I think that is largely because there are a lot of different local compliances and international compliances that every country has to adhere to. So there are different treaties, different conventions that every country signs up for, and they are expected to sort of follow them, right? But I don't think the process is slow because the each country has different priorities. These are very complex issues being dealt with, right? So it's not something that can be solved in 2 days. It takes years and years to come up with something that all countries or most countries can agree upon. So I think as long as the countries are able to at least follow what they agree upon, I think we are on the right track, although the process is extremely slow.
Aryan, you were saying something, I think.
No, yeah. Most of the points have been covered.
Okay. So just to slightly add on to something here, and then Shreya could take over. I just want to mention that even though the democratic process is quite cumbersome and it requires the agreement of all, and again, Arush's point that they are coming to conclusions, even though too slow perhaps. But I would just like to point out here that I think we are coming back to the first question with respect to the political will, right? That how 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 eager are the countries really willing to, like, what issues are being dealt with here? Let's say if it's a trade issue which the developed countries want to sort of safeguard with respect to, they don't want the developing countries to put in protectionist measures which would slow down their exports, right? China would not want that, and the US would not want that. And it's sort of to say that issues like these can be seen to be more dragged out. But issues perhaps such as the global tax rate that all the countries have agreed to now, and which is also a very crucial aspect, is the 15% global minimum tax rate that was issued back in 2021 by the G20 members. So I believe it's more selective, perhaps to say, rather than putting it mildly. Sorry. Shreya, you can take over.
So decision making process is like consensus. So I feel somewhere this might be slow and cumbersome, but on the other side, especially like when quick decisions are needed, this might hinder its effectiveness. But on the other side, when there's inclusivity, there's a consideration of wider range of factors. So that might be a plus point whenever G20 decides to adopt a policy or anything new.
Okay, so then let's look at the kinds of issues that the G20 focuses on. We have, like crisis management in the short term, and then we have certain long-term challenges that the G20 continuously talks about during every single meeting. So how do we find that balance that the G20 works towards? Is there a bit much of a focus on short-term crisis management that prevents long-term challenge, resolutions being passed, or how do we find that balance for these countries?
Like so like G20 having its democratic principles of equal participation of all the countries, I believe that a consensus on deciding whether to focus more on short-term goals or to focus on long-term goals, it's very puzzling issue, because a lot of short-term issues like we had during the COVID period of how to manage these the vaccines that were produced, or all the testing issues that were coming up, and how the viruses were mutating itself. Taking short term goals, I think it should be a more there should be a more streamlined processes to cater for a more urgent issues that is in matter. Which might include lot of parameters or a lot of issues, including natural calamities or epidemics, health epidemics, or any other issues that might affect a country or the group of countries, economy and the citizens of that country. It should be given a little bit more priority. But saying that we should always keep the long term goals a priority itself, because in the long term, for the future generations, I believe that having a more sustainable manner to tackle these issues would be a add on to the process of G20, so as to keep the group uh, more relevant to the times.
just to add on to what Aryan has actually said, the G20 grouping by itself, or at least according to me, must focus on the short-term problems with the aim on the long-term issues, that have been plaguing the country's economic development. For example, if I were to take the Russia-Ukraine war had started in the early 2022s, and that war was actually a point of a discussion in this year's G20, although that was not included in the declaration of the countries. But more importance was also given to the climate change, trade disputes, to name a few. So at least according to me, the G20 grouping must focus on the short term issues with a focus on the long term.
Short-term need to align with each other. Like when we talk about sustainable development as the long-term goal, there are very small steps such as solar panels, climate risk mitigation being taken. So I think if we sort of align the short-term and the long-term goals, this might be a midway approach.
Yeah, I think refining on Shreya's point a little more, I think the solution that comes up with all these short-term crises is what actually leads to long-term cooperation. So if we see a lot of the hurdles that a lot of countries face while cooperating with each other are mainly because of these short-term pressing issues that sort of hinder some sort of diplomatic talks between the relevant parties. So I think addressing short-term issues is also very important because that's what ultimately leads to long-term cooperation.
All right. And I want to go back to something that I think Basu mentioned at the beginning, how he thought that sometimes there might be a slight focus on Western powers or the Western hegemony within the G20, or that certain developed member countries might have more of a priority within the G20. Do we see something like that? That only certain interests for certain countries have been effective?
The Western, if we look at the times when the G20 was introduced, having a Western power over the presiding countries was very evident. But in current times, when countries like China, India have started to show that their economy is more powerful and they have a footprint in the world economy, they have started to show a good enough power, and shifting from the previous approach of soft power that was shown by India. They have started to put a more presence of their own presence in the G20, and trying to be at par with the Western countries, and being a strong member, and so as to uh, put forth their views, and to show that they are no more the country that can be dictated by the Western powers. So I believe that in the recent times, India and all the upcoming countries, the Asian countries, have started to show the Western world that we also have a say in the economy, and we would like to put forth our opinions.
Just to mention, the 55-member African Union was formally made a permanent member of the G20 this year. So that is a really big step in ensuring a voice to all and not just the Western interests. And as the world order, I believe, evolves, we can already see that the shift is there is definitely a shift from the just Western interests. Just as another example is the transport corridor that the leaders of the United States, India, and Saudi Arabia collaborated. And so while to say that it is just catering to Western interests, I believe would be making it too simplistic, because while the major funds, sort of to say, will perhaps end up coming from the Western nations because of their economic standhold currently, eh, there is the forum, I believe, still acts as a catalyst for global growth and not just Western interests.
Just to add on to what Aryan and Chetan said, not only G20, but any multilateral institution, if you would actually observe, the developed countries would have more say when compared to developing or lesser developed countries, because the the developed countries such as the US or the EU, where one of the founding members of UN, or even the G20. So being a founding member by themselves, and also as those members who are actually economically more developed, and considering their the demand of goods and services, which each country has, they would certainly have more dominance. But if actually we were to observe the years such as 2020s or 2021, or even this year, the countries such as India or China have been developing, and they have been ensuring that even their voices are heard. And it is also something which is worth mentioning, that India had played its role in making sure that Africa was included into the G20 grouping. So this itself is a testament that India is actually carrying more for the other developing countries as well.
Right. So let's come back to India now, where we started. So India hosted the G20 Summit this year. And so how significant do we think the G20 presidency was for India? There was, mixed responses. Again, keep your responses a little bit short, guys. We are running a little bit short on time.
So I think India's presidency in the forum was quite helpful in terms of preserving what India's interests are. So if we look at the key highlights of what was discussed in the 2023 G20 summit, we'll see a lot of different business deals going on. So the economic corridor that I think Chetan mentioned a little earlier, there were talks about some deals with the USA, which really affected Hindustan Aeronautics Limited in a major way. There were talks about aircrafts and general infrastructure development for India. So I think in that sense, it was pretty good. Also, in terms of something like sustainable development goals and climate financing, it's good to see that India is very proactive when it comes to switching to green energy, and India has worked towards it a lot for the since the past decade. But as a developing country with a really large requirement for energy and resources, I really think it's going to be a little difficult for India to negotiate with a lot of the developed countries and key players around the world in terms of how we deal with switching to green energy as a developing country.
Like, to add on to Arush's point, India's presidency of G20 does show its power in the current global scenario, and its standpoint in the world among the top developing countries, not only in terms of economy but in terms of foreign relationship, and dictating, not just being able to follow the route set by the Western powers, but to also dictate few of the paths that have been taken by the G20 countries and the Western powers. It shows how India is India's standpoint in the world, and shows the power it can wield and how the future would be with with the current developing countries like India, China, and Asian countries. It shows the power that earlier used to be with the Western world has started to shift towards the Asian countries, and they have started to wield more economic power as compared to the Western world.
I would personally not accord too much weight to the fact that India hosted the G20 this time around, because at the end of the day, it is a global forum and not necessarily not just a stage for India to showcase its, perhaps sort of to say, its dominance that it will now try to establish. And I personally would not accord too much weight, other than just perhaps an opportunity to bring the global members together on the same page.
All right, does anyone else have anything else to add? All right, so if we've all said what we want to say, I think we can conclude here. It was a very good, useful discussion about the G20 as a whole and how India might or might not have been effective within that summit. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you again.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.